What is going on, guys? I am LaserBolt and welcome to another No BS review. Today we're going to be taking a look at Gotham Knights, one of the most hyped games of 2022, yet one of the most scrutinized games of 22 as well. Today we're going to be talking about if this game is worth your time, but most importantly, is this game worth your money? Hence this being a No BS review, I'm actually going to give you the score this game got before we go ahead and dive in deeper. Now, I do want to let you guys know this score does represent me playing it on PC. I have an additional score for console, but you guys are definitely going to want to stay tuned for the review. This game got an 85 out of 100 in our No BS meter. If you want to find out how exactly we got to that number and why, then definitely stay tuned for the rest of the review. So like always, let's get ahead and get started with the story. In Gotham Knights, guys, you are going to be in charge of avenging Batman's death. Not only avenging his death, but also taking back control of a city that has gone in complete chaos due to Batman dying. There is a brand new criminal underground society known as the Court of Owls. They have taken a complete grasp of not only the city, but every other villain as well. They want to control the city and they want to dominate it. It's up to you and any of the Bat family to take back control of the city of Gotham and save its citizens from ultimate chaos. Now, you'll be tasked with solving mysteries, connecting the darkest chapters of the history city, defeating notorious villains, and epic confrontations not only against thugs, but also some of the most iconic villains in the Batman series. Gotham Knights is an open world action RPG, and it's definitely one of the most dynamic and interactive Gotham cities we've seen yet. We're going to talk a little bit more when we talk about the gameplay, but guys, the city kind of takes a big part within this game due to the fact that there is a lot of lore to find in the game and also a lot of familiar places that you've gone accustomed to by not only watching the movies, but also playing the Arkham Knights series. Now, I do want to make this point very clear before we get into the gameplay. If you're coming in with the mindset that this is a continuation to Arkham, then this is definitely not the way you want to approach this game. This is a completely entire different game, and you're going to want to make sure you make that separation so you can appreciate how good this game is. Now, in addition to that, tying into the story, guys, there are 5 distinct boroughs that, like I said, you are going to become very familiar to and should be accustomed to if you ever watch any of the Batman series or you did play Arkham. Now, with the story being set in place, let's talk about the gameplay. The gameplay in Gotham Knights is something very fluid. When I say fluid, I mean that it gives you the advantage of tasking whatever task you want to take first and not being kind of set in stone which task you have to complete. You want to go and fight crime without doing any mission? You could go fight crime without doing any mission. You want to go and defeat a very bad villain or an iconic villain? You could go and fight a very iconic villain. You want to complete the storyline before fighting any iconic villain? You could do that. And that is one thing I love about the game. The game does not tie you down to playing the game at a certain pattern. You're actually able to play the game not only at your pace, but also in the way you want to play it. If you want to go complete vigilante and go fight as much crime as you possibly can, then you could go ahead and do that anytime you want. And that is something I really enjoyed about the game. Another great thing about the game that I found was very intuitive is the fact that they went ahead and didn't make the game boring. Usually sometimes when you play a game, things become so repetitive that you're like, man, I'm doing this all over again. I like the fluidity they had within the gameplay due to the fact that whenever you do a mission, there's either a puzzle to solve, there's a mystery to be had, or there's a secret pattern that you need to find, there's secret chests that you need to obtain, there's secret areas that you could reach. And this is what makes the game very dynamic, as the fact that this is a open world game, and this is going to be very profound because, guys, this is definitely by far a very big map, and it's one of the biggest maps. I think I could say that's probably bigger than the Spider-Man map, and that is something I really appreciate because there are a lot of things to do within the game. So not only is the map pretty big, but there are a lot of things to do within that big map. Now, granted, the map does feel sometimes empty, and I mean, in retrospect, it kind of makes sense because it's nighttime, not a lot of people are out. I wish I would have seen a little bit more people out in the streets to bring it a little bit more to life. But overall, in general, guys, there are a ton of objectives, a lot of side missions, a lot of enemies found within the world roaming that makes the gameplay very fluid. Even when you guys are moving around the city and trying to go fight crime or trying to go ahead and complete a mission or do a side quest, there's always something that could catch your attention and you could be like, you know what, I'm going to do that real quick before I go ahead and complete this side mission or this quest. And that is something I really enjoyed about the gameplay, is the fact that it doesn't make the gameplay boring or repetitive. It actually gives you something to do. Every time you guys decide to go to Gotham, there's always something new to have. Now, one of the questions you probably have is, Laser, how long do you think I'll be able to play this game, or how much content is there? So theoretically, guys, if you just do the storyline, it's going to take you roughly between 10 to 12 hours, I would say, depending on how good you are with combat. In addition to that, guys, there are iconic villains that you're going to be able to fight, so that could add you another 5 hours. And in addition to that, guys, there's the endgame activity, which is having you level up your character, getting the outfits, getting the gear, getting the right weapons, putting the right build. So I'm going to say, guys, if you want to make sure you guys have a really good, solid character for whenever that 30 level mode comes out, it's going to take you between roughly, I would say, 30 to 40 hours, which is pretty good for just one individual night. Now, if you guys want to go ahead and max out like a Batgirl, Nightwing, have like multiple nights, then you're going to be able to extend the game a little bit further. And it's something I did want to mention because I know replayability plays such a huge role, especially when it's an open world game and when it's a game that's done like this. All right, so now let's talk about combat. And before we get into combat, I do want to make sure that if you played Arkham Knights, don't expect the Arkham Knights combat. This is extremely important that I mention it because I know a lot of you guys are going to come in with that idea. Think of this game as a whole different game. If you do, you're going to find that the combat is actually pretty solid. I'm going to tell you guys, all the clips that you've seen on YouTube or any other video that the company has shown, it doesn't look so fluid, but when you actually play the game and you unlock certain skills and certain abilities, you're going to notice that the combat actually works very fluidly. Not only that, but tied in with the combination of you being able to use these super abilities, aka momentum abilities, it makes the gameplay very fluid because you're constantly trying to fill the momentum bar. So you could go ahead and activate and use one of your momentum abilities or use a very powerful momentum ability. And that makes the combat system very fluid because there are multiple enemies that you're going to be able to encounter. It's not just one set of enemy. And each enemy will have its own mechanics. So you have to stun some enemies to be able to hit them. You have to dodge. You have to do super dodges. And you have to use these momentum abilities to maximize that potential to stagger or to weaken an enemy. So it makes the combat very fluid. Once you learn the pattern and once you get accustomed to using these momentum abilities and tying them together with your brawling abilities, it just meshes very well. And the combat system does work very fluid. So every time I review a game like this, I always want to talk about the endgame loop because I think one of the main reasons you get an open world game is because you want to make sure you get that endgame loop, especially if it's a multiplayer game. So this does feature a 4-player co-op mission that's going to be available on November the 28th, if I'm correct, or 29th. So that's something to look forward to, but we're not going to include that in the review. Just wanted to give you guys a heads up. But one of the main things, of course, like any game, your main objective at the beginning is going to be leveling up and hitting that level, which is level 30. Now, I will have a video on how to speed up that leveling system, so you guys are definitely going to want to check that out. But with that being said, what actually happens after you level up? Well, the next thing you're going to want to do is work on a build because builds are really important in this game. I think a lot of people are really not taking that too much into account. There are a lot of elemental damage and elemental builds that you could put together that are going to make you super OP. And of course, we'll have builds here on the channel for each character as well. And that is definitely one of those end games. In addition to that, guys, what's the point of you being level 30? What's the point of you having the proper build if you're going to look ugly? And definitely, guys, you're going to want to make sure that you look prestige and pristine when it comes to playing this game. And there are a ton of different types of suits you're able to unlock. In addition to that, there's different types of color schematics you get for that particular suit. Not only is there transmog within the suits, but guys, the weapons sometimes change appearance depending on what type of weapon you have, which is really dope. You have a range and you have a melee weapon, so you're definitely going to want to make sure you get that accustomed. There are 4 additional knights within the game, so you could definitely, the end game could be leveling up another character, so it could suit a playstyle whenever a really high-end activity comes out. You're not only stuck with a support class, but you also have an offensive class as well, or you have 2 support classes, 1 offensive class. So there is a lot of build variety when it comes to the characters by themselves. Now, on top of all of this, guys, there are iconic villains you could actually hunt down and take them out if you haven't saw already while you're leveling up, and this gives you a little bit more replayability. In addition to that, there are other like mini bosses that you're also able to find within the world, and there's a ton of them. I think there's like way over 12 of them that you're able to find in each borough, so there is a lot of replayability, and that's not counting the 4-player co-op mode. Now, with that being said, guys, I think it does give you a lot of replayability as far as the end game loop, especially if you're trying to pick up this game to play with someone else, or you're probably playing by yourself, but you want a lot of things to do as you progress throughout the game. Now, I kind of spoken all the good stuff about the game, and I know you guys are saying, Laser, what is the negative? Because right now it's sounding like a 9. I don't know why you're giving it an 8.5. There are a couple negatives that I found while playing the game. Number one, I did experience a lot of frame drops, so there was a couple times when I was, not during combat, but this was actually the most interesting part. I was actually getting the frame drops on cutscenes, and I was also getting the frame drops as I was driving in the city, not while I was fighting, which is kind of weird. And I was playing on a PC. Now, while I was making this review, there was the big drama about the console getting stuck to 30 frames per second. So before me completing the full review, I was able to nab myself a copy on the PlayStation 5, played it a little bit to give you guys an opinion for those of you who are console players to know exactly if it's really that much of a deal. And I gotta be honest with you guys, the ray tracing on this game makes the game look beautiful. Okay, you're gonna notice the difference. It's gonna pop off the screen, the lighting, the reflections of the characters, and just pretty much when it's raining and the city and the vibe. The ray tracing is very amazing. And the reason I'm mentioning the ray tracing is because that is the reason why we're capped at 30 frames, is because they wanted to include ray tracing. And to be quite honest, while you're driving and while you're doing cutscenes and while you're doing all that, you're not really gonna notice the 30 frames per second. The only time you might have an issue is when you're actually in a combat scene. You're going to notice that a frame might skip, but it's not something that's going to be like on the back of your head. It's like, man, this is really buggy. It's happening every single time. It only happens when there are multiple and a ton of enemies around you. That's when you kind of notice that little 30-second frames. But the ray tracing does such a good job of kind of masking it in the sense that everything looks so good that I could probably tell you that if you didn't know that it was capped at 30 frames per second, you probably wouldn't even notice it. Now, that was my experience when I played on the PlayStation 5, but I want to know from you guys, if you guys do pick up on this console and you watch this review, come back and let me know if you guys did notice the 30 frames per second or not. Now, another thing that I feel like it needed a little bit more polish was the fact that there are a lot of polygons that are misplaced in the game. There was a scene when Red Hood was talking and his sweater tie was all up in the air floating like it was suspended. A lot of times when you're playing as Batgirl, her cape gets locked and it doesn't go back in place. So I think the game did need like at least 2 to 3 weeks to maybe a month of more polishing. I don't know if there's going to be a patch that's going to get released on day one and it's going to probably fix all of this, but for my playtime that I experienced with the game, there was a lot of poly issues, which I think should definitely be addressed with a very easy patch. Now, those are the main negatives I have to mention about the game. There are a lot of positives. Sound-wise, very good. You're going to need a really good pair of headsets for these. There are a lot of dynamic sounds that you're going to want to make sure you experience. I have a review on a headset that's actually pretty good, so you're probably going to want to check that out if you get a chance. Overall, the story, I felt that it was actually pretty solid. I liked the way it transitioned and it played out. There was a lot of mystery involved, and it actually had me engaged in the story. It wasn't something that I was like, oh, I don't want to pay attention to the story, or the story doesn't matter in this game. The story did feel very appealing. With all the customization, the gameplay mechanics, you're even able to customize your bike, and all of the cool features that they implemented in the game, like the mystery solving, the puzzle solving. I definitely feel very strongly on giving these 85 out of 100. I hope you guys are enjoying our game reviews. We're going to be bringing you a ton of more game reviews here on the channel. So if you are enjoying it, a like would be greatly appreciated. Now, talking about that, guys, if you want to know how to level fast in this game, make sure you check out this video that's popping up right now on the screen. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about leveling up, or you can check out the other video that we have live on the channel, which is things you wish you knew before you played. Now, if you guys want to show us additional love and support, guys, do consider becoming part of the Bold Nation by hitting that join button down below. That does help us out quite a lot. And in addition to that, guys, we're going to be helping you guys whenever we get these high-end level content to not only pass and complete them, but to make sure you guys get all those achievements. So that's kind of an incentive we want to throw out there for you guys. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you guys on the next video.